I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, not the democracy, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This was first announced on October 12, Columbus Day, in 1892, and it was added under God in June 14, 1954. I'd like you to remember some important dates. July 4, 1776, Declaration of Independence. May 29, 1790, the Constitution was ratified by the states. January 1, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation by Abraham Lincoln. January 19, 1920, the ACLU was organized. July 20, 1925, the Scopes Monkey Trial in Dayton, Tennessee. 1933, the Humanist Manifesto, no God, we're human beings, we have to save ourselves. June 25, 1962, no Bible or prayer in public school anymore. And June 22, 1973, Roe versus Wade. Since then, 62.5 million babies have been killed before they were born. Well, my title is from the Declaration, One Nation under God. Now, Arlo and I have traveled to about 80 countries, 6 continents. In fact, we traveled nearly every year until we got to where we couldn't travel anymore. We have discovered that about 40% of the world's population is not free. And you had to get a tour to go there. You couldn't really get in any other way. And most of the rest that we do call free have a state church. You remember England ruled the world for a long time, most of the world. And the Anglican Church is the state church in most of those previously English countries. And of course, you are aware that most Latin countries have a state church, which is the Catholic Church. And many of them pay the preachers. The government pays them. We've traveled a lot, but we prefer America. When we went to Russia, as soon as we got to the state line out of Russia, we all began to sing, "God Bless America," the whole bus. Well, the United States is a country of immigrants. They came to this country to find no king or no pope. And most countries that have freedom are Christian countries. And that's no accident, because the only real freedom comes from Christian principles and from Christ. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. Now, God's most precious gift to us is Jesus, of course, but his package demands that we have freedom of choice. And this demands what we call separation of church and state. The First Amendment of the Constitution reads this way: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Thank the Lord for the First Amendment. And we have depended on that because that's been important for Seventh-day Adventists many times. Back in the early 1900s, when I went to school, public school, you could use the Bible somewhat, and you could pray, especially in the South. The South is where the Bible Belt is. But June 25, 1962, the Supreme Court ruled that you couldn't do that anymore. And in the 1990s, my wife Arlo was teaching nursing at Mesa College. And her students were afraid of the test coming up, and so they asked her to pray for them. She didn't fall for that, but she did write out a prayer on paper for them to read before they went to their test. And they did that. And the administration called her on it. She wasn't supposed to do that. They didn't punish her, but anyway. Well, the Supreme Court ruled in a Santa Fe, Texas case, 6-3, that a student chosen by fellow students could not pray with them before the football game. If you wanted to pray, you had to pray silently on your own. Well, maybe we should agree, sort of, because only if you defend the rights of everyone do we deserve to have those rights ourselves. A Dr. Nudo with the ACLU, nearly everything is with the ACLU, sued to remove "under God" from the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know just how they did that. I don't know whether the court accepted it and ruled or whether they just refused it. But anyway, they declined. But the ACLU sued Roy Moore, the Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice, to remove the engraved 10 Commandments in the entrance to his courtroom. He declined. He refused. And I don't know just how they did it, but anyway, they got rid of him. They removed him. I'm wondering just how far we have to go to defend ourselves against every protester, every critic, every crackpot. How about the rest of us? There is an organization called Freedom from Religion, not Freedom of Religion, which we believe in, a group of atheists, freedom from religion. Using the ACLU, they sue most every public expression that comes up about Christianity or Christian celebration, and yet they defend the rights of the pornographer, the flag burner, the demonstrator. How about the rights of parents? Have children. How about the patriotic flag lover? How about you and me? Oh, that's in the Constitution. The signers of the Declaration and the Constitution were atheists and deists, anti-religious. Really? Oh, there were a few. There are always a few. There are a few now, you know. Everywhere you go, there are a few. Ellen White took after one of them, and about 10 entrances in her index about Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was an atheist, and he wrote some books, and there's some of them. But how about this challenge that they were a bunch of atheists? This is the Daily Sentinel. You're acquainted with the Daily Sentinel. The father of our country, George Washington. I really have never heard anybody complain too much about him. It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor. Well, we expected that. John Adams, the second president. We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And I'm skipping the third president, Jefferson. He said some strange things sometimes, but he was enamored with the Bible. He read the Bible a lot because he decided it had too much duplication. And so he took a scissors and he cut out the places that he thought were duplicated. He didn't need it all. And you can read it with a smaller, you can buy a Jefferson Bible. It's available today. It's a much smaller Bible. Of course, you are aware that you're not supposed to cut up your Bible. Our fourth president, James Madison, who is called the father of the Constitution, he says, before any man can be considered as a member of civil society, he must be considered as a subject of the governor of the universe. Well, that's pretty good. And the sixth president, which is John Quincy Adams, he says, is it not that in the chain of human events, the birthday of the nation is indissolubly linked with the birthday of the Savior? That it forms a leading event in the progress of the gospel dispensation? Is it not that the Declaration of Independence first organized the social compact on the foundation of the Redeemer's mission upon the earth? That it laid the cornerstone of human government upon the first precepts of Christianity? And you probably would want to remember Patrick Henry. We've been to Williamsburg, Virginia, the capital of the state of Virginia until 1779. It's been moved to Richmond. But it's still the capital once a year, because once a year they go down there to Williamsburg and have a session of the conference in the original Capitol building. And the church that they went to so many times is the Bruton Episcopal Church, which is the oldest Anglican church in the United States. Patrick Henry says, an appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature has placed in our power. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There's the just God who presides over the destinies of nations and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Well, you might look at Benjamin Franklin. He said some strange things too. But he says, of course, he's the one that came out after they had the convention, and he said, what did you decide? And he said, we decided to have a republic, if you can keep it. Well, Benjamin Franklin said, I lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. If a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can raise without his aid? We've been assured in the sacred writings that unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. Well, interesting. And one more here. When I went to school, they always had a book, that told you what the rules were. And so every institution has a book, Harvard and Yale, they're the liberal places of the United States now. But they were originally seminaries to turn out preachers. And here is what Harvard's yearbook said back in 1636. Let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well the main end of this life, and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life. And therefore to lay Christ in the bottom as the only foundation of all sound knowledge and learning. And seeing the Lord only giveth wisdom, let every one seriously set himself by prayer in secret to seek it of him, Proverbs 2:3. Every one shall so exercise himself in reading the Scriptures twice a day, that he shall be ready to give such an account of his proficiency therein. Harvard. What happened to Harvard? Something happened. Well, Leviticus 25:10. Where can we find this? Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. You say, well, it's in the book of Leviticus. You just read that. Well, where else can you find it? We've been there. We've been to 2 or 3 of these places. It's engraved on the Liberty Bell. We've seen it. We've been there in Philadelphia. July 4, 1776. I have here a much smaller, much briefer Declaration of Independence. July 4, 1776 had 56 signers. And what did they say? Included in these are the phrases, nature's God, created equal, endowed by their Creator, divine providence, supreme judge of the world, sacred honor. Sounds like a pretty good prayer for a bunch of atheists, doesn't it? Well, you can't pray at a public meeting, or you can't pray with players at a football game in Santa Fe, Texas, nor with students at CMU. You know, my wife taught nursing at CMU, and so you can't pray at CMU, I guess. Well, no kidding. What about this? How about Washington, D.C.? Now, I'm told that the Supreme Court employs a tax-paid chaplain to offer prayer before every session. And they have an engraved 10 Commandments behind their desk. The House of Representatives has a tax-paid chaplain, opens every meeting with prayer. Surely not the Senate. Well, for some years, the Senate has had a tax-paid Seventh-day Adventist chaplain named Barry Black. Whoever got this system together 200 years ago was pretty strong on prayer. It's a myth that most of the founders of our country were not Christians. Well, every branch of the United States government has a building. And what do these buildings look like? You don't just build a house and leave the wall bare, do you? In fact, we've got our house so covered with pictures we can't find another place to put a picture. So they had to have some decorations. What kind of decorations do they have in these buildings? An old, retired, now dead Southern legislator, I have not recalled his name, used to take visitors on tours of the buildings in Washington, D.C. And nearly all of them have engravings of the 10 Commandments, biblical scenes from Moses and so forth. It's okay in Washington, not in Santa Fe, Texas, or Grand Junction, Colorado. Well, back in 1814, Francis Scott Key was a soldier in the American Army when in the British bombardment of Fort McHenry. And the flag was flying over Fort McHenry, and they had the bombardment on through the rest of the evening, and the flag was still there in the morning. And Francis Scott Key wrote down in 1814 and wrote out the words to a song that has become and was voted our national anthem on March 3, 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner. Every baseball game, every football game, every hockey game, all sporting events, sing the first verse. Maybe I should qualify that a little. I've heard some of them that you could hardly recognize. They sure do butcher up in the national anthem. It's something anyway. But at any rate, there's a second verse, a last verse to the Star-Spangled Banner. Then conquer we must, for our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. It's our motto. It's on every coin. It's on every dollar bill. Do you look at your dollar bill very often? It's there. In spite of Dr. Nudo and the ACLU and their suit to the Supreme Court to remove "Under God and in God We Trust." Well, we sing other songs too, patriotic songs. America, America the Beautiful. The middle of every seventh inning, we always sing Irving Berlin's "God Bless America." Well, 3 years before I was born, July 20, 1925, on a cooked-up trial with cooperation of the defendant, John Scopes, I think they gave him some money to cooperate. In Dayton, Tennessee, they had the Scopes monkey trial. Now, there was no monkey there, but you are aware that Darwin, in his book, Origin of the Species, said there are two kinds of monkeys. They're old world monkeys and they're new world monkeys, and that the human race is descended from the old world monkeys. So we have the Scopes monkey trial. Of course, back then, they were teaching creation from the Bible in public schools. And Scopes was teaching biology in a public school. Well, the lawyer was Clarence Darrow, a popular lawyer, and he was the offense, and he was suing William Jennings Bryan of the defense over the teaching that God created the world. Now, William Jennings Bryan ran for president once. He was a politician, but he was also a preacher. And they had the Scopes monkey trial. They said it's not fair in schools to have only one system of origins. You need to teach some other systems of origins. Well, two of my buddies and I drove up to Dayton, Tennessee, from where we were having a seminar in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We drove up there 50 years later. And we went to the courthouse, and we sat in the courthouse where the trial took place. And then we went to the drugstore, and we sat at the very same table and the very same chairs that the lawyers sat when they had the getting ready for the trial. Now, William Jennings Bryan won. They won this case. They decided not to do what he wanted, what the Darrow wanted to do. But of course, creation has lost since then. And today, there is still only one system of origins being taught, and that's evolution. So to teach and study evolution is against the law in this country. Psalm chapter 9, verse 17. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. Well, sometime after this, the evolutionists got together and they founded what is called the American Humanist Society. And they developed a statement called the Humanist Manifesto in 1933. Now, they're listed as a religion. One of the definitions of a religion, there are a lot of definitions, but one of them is a belief in something that you would be willing to die for. Would you be willing to die for your religion? Well, these evolutionists would be willing to do that. They will fight to the death to keep creation out of public schools. Evolution is listed in some dictionaries as a religion. And the humanists are listed as a religion. One of these signers of this manifesto was John Dewey. He's the founder of the American public school system. He's called the father of the American school system. You probably heard of the Dewey Decimal System. And they believe that it's up to the humans to save themselves. There is no God. So humanism has become the religion of the public schools. We've added the word secular to this, secular humanism. Secular is just the opposite. It's an antonym for the belief in God. And today, we have that as our public school curriculum. Probably the most famous humanist in the United States was Julian Huxley. You've heard the name maybe. He's the grandson of Thomas Huxley over in England in the 1800s, who has been named Darwin's bulldog. He was Charles Darwin's bulldog. Now, Darwin wrote The Origin of the Species in 1844. Interesting date, because that's a date important to us. But he didn't get it published for 15 years, till 1859. And the trouble was Darwin was rather a mild-mannered person, sort of a sickly person sometimes, and so he needed a bulldog, and that was Thomas Huxley. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten his book written if it hadn't been for his bulldog. I don't know, but at any rate, we have The Origin of the Species. Secular humanism, what is it? The Humanist Manifesto is a document signed by 34 well-known intellectuals, including John Dewey and Lester Mondale. Its principles included the denial of God, no supernatural, no life after death, the acceptance of the Darwinian theory of evolution, the idea that man is a product of his environment and thus not responsible for his own actions, an opposition to free enterprise and support for a socialized economic order. In fact, secular humanism has a well-defined set of principles put on paper by its founders. It seeks to define the place of man in the universe and explain his origins. It proselytes, seeking to gain converts. In other words, it has all the characteristics of a religion. As the saying goes, if it swims like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. And we've had to do, again, our books that we use in public schools. Virtually all references to Judeo-Christian religion has been systematically eliminated from the American textbooks. Today, the values to which our children are exposed by their textbooks are almost exclusively humanist, in clear violation of the First Amendment, which prohibits the government from favoring one religion over another. Well, England and Europe have become largely secular. I'm told that only about 5% of the people in Europe, except for Romania maybe, where we've got a lot of Adventists, only about 5% attend church anymore in Europe. Now, America has usually been a Christian nation. We always had more than half of Americans that belonged to a church and had a belief. America has slipped a little. It's now down to 47%. Are we still a Christian nation? Well, the Supreme Court ruled back in 1892 in the case of Holy Trinity versus the United States that we are a Christian nation. 1892. Are we still a Christian nation? Psalm 33, verse 12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Well, now, Seventh-day Adventists still have the Sabbath. We still keep the Sabbath, which remembers creation. May I say, we don't keep it like we used to. Isaiah 58, verse 13 has this phrase in it, not doing your own pleasure on my holy day. Is there danger we could get away from that meaning? I'm sure there is. I'm sure the devil would like to get us away from it. Well, at any rate, let's keep the Sabbath. That's our way of keeping creation before us. Well, there's one more, and we really aren't proper if we don't do the one more. The ACLU. How about the ACLU, the American Christian Liberties Union? In the first place, it's a misrepresentation because it was not designated by real Americans. And it has never defended the religious liberty of people who believe in religious liberty. They've only defended the crooks. So Tim LaHaye, who is a Protestant preacher and a writer, he's given the ACLU a new name, the Antichrist Lawsuit Union. And that's about correct. It's up in the hundreds of thousands of cases that they've sued, and always against somebody who's trying to practice his religion. Roger Baldwin, an ex-convict and strong advocate of communism for the U.S., founded the ACLU in 1920. Members of Baldwin's first board of directors were card-carrying communists. Max Eastman was the editor of a communist newspaper, The Masses. William Z. Foster later became the president of the United States Communist Party, and with Helen Gurley Flynn, who was long associated with the Daily Worker. And this is a quote from Baldwin: "I am for socialism, disarmament, and ultimately for abolishing the state itself as an instrument of violence and compulsion. I seek social ownership of property, the abolition of the property class, and the sole control by those who produce the wealth, the ordinary worker. Communism is the goal." The ACLU was founded by known communists, communist principles. You couldn't have gotten it from Russia, just as plain. And for, I don't know about today, but in the 1920s and much of the 20th century, ACLU was a communist organization. I can't say that for today because I can't prove that. The ACLU has been known for lawsuits. Bill Murray, later converted as a Christian, was the son of Madeleine Murray O'Hare. You remember her? Madeleine Murray O'Hare. She's the one that took ACLU lawyers and advised her in 1961 to file the suit that started the secularization of our public schools. I don't know what to say for sure. There may be some people that like the ACLU, but I usually don't even have to make my mind up. I usually just see what they're for, and I'm against it. It's almost automatic. I really don't know of anything that the ACLU ever did that was very beneficial to me or to you. Now, you don't have to agree with me if you don't want to, because you have freedom of religion. Well, 4 sets of my great-grandparents immigrated here to this country from Europe legally, not illegally. The Edens, the Goleys, the Neffs, and the Kellers. My name was originally Goley, not Goley. And they were welcomed by the Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty was built for this. Engraved on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty is, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Well, millions have come, and they haven't left. They've stayed here. And they didn't find a perfect America. They found slavery in the South. So they mainly settled in the North and the Midwest. At the South, had slavery. The South people owned black human beings, and we fought a war over it called the Civil War. but a Bible-believing, praying president acted. January 1, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, that didn't really free the slaves. That was just a proclamation. But we fought a civil war, and it took 2.5 years after that to decide it. July 1 and 2, that's yesterday and the day before, in 1863, the deciding battle of Gettysburg had come. And this is a quote. General Lee and his army had surged forward to the environments of Gettysburg, where the fateful decisive battle of the Civil War was in the making. The source and burdens of the war-torn nation had exacted its terrible toll on the occupant of the White House, Abraham Lincoln. Yet on the eve of the crucial battle, he was calm and assured. His serenity was reassuring to his generals. When they inquired, "How can you be so self-possessed in this hour of the nation's mortal peril and darkness?" Lincoln said, "I spent last night in prayer before the Lord. He has given me the assurance that our cause will triumph and that the nation will be preserved." Abraham Lincoln. Lee surrendered April 19, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse. And you are aware of the most recent development. The word did not get to the slaves in Galveston, Texas, until 2.5 months later, when a general went down there with some soldiers and told them they were free on June 19th. June 19th, and President Biden has made this a national holiday. Now, you can't have it on June 19th this year because that's a Sabbath. And in order to have a national holiday, you have to have a day free from work. So they made it on 18th this year. You're aware that everything usually is on a Monday, so you can get the day off. Well, at any rate, it's important that we decide that liberty is worth dying for. We have a plaque next to our lavatory in our bedroom that says, "Peace on the earth, peace on the outside comes from knowing God on the inside." It was given to us by Kathy. 2 Corinthians 3, verse 17 says, "Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty." And if you want to take the reverse of it, where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is not liberty. The only real freedom is freedom from sin. John 8, verse 32. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Well, truth, you know, we used to use the word a lot. It used to be Adventist word. And the word truth was almost, that's Seventh-day Adventist, the truth, you know. When did you join the truth? And when did you find the truth? Used to be the word we used. Truth is important. For a while now, our country has not been too concerned about the truth. We have the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are called in James chapter 2, verse 10, the law of liberty. But there have been some Seventh-day Adventists who have thought they could get away from all the law and the rules and the doctrines, and they could be free if they could just get away from all of it. Well, you know, we did have a lot of rules. We've had a lot of rules. I went to Enterprise Academy. They had one end of the campus was the girls' dormitory, and the other end was the boys' dormitory. In the middle, they had a fish pond. And a boy better not ever get on the wrong side of the fish pond, or a girl on the other side of the fish pond. That was dangerous, you know. But on Sabbaths, you could go for a walk. But the rule was, on one Sabbath, the girls walk north and the boys walk south. The next Sabbath, the boys got to walk north and the girls got to walk south. Well, I grew up back then. That's the way I grew up. I went to Union College. Professor was Professor Constantine. And back then, the only way you could have a date was on Saturday night, because on Saturday night you could sit with a girl at the Lyceum. And the rest of the time, you better not be caught really talking with a girl. And I remember one chapel meeting that we had where Constantine stood up and he said, you know, there have been some of you boys and girls that have been walking together down the Serpentine Walk from the clock tower. And this is going to stop. And if you don't like it, you can fold your tent like the Arab and silently wend your way. He did say that. Well, we've gone back for nearly every 5 years for our alumni meeting. There's no rule like that anymore. There are boys and girls sitting together all over the campus. That's a rule that's gone now. I don't know how many rules we've gotten rid of, but you realize a lot of the rules you don't have anymore. Well, one of the saddest experiences of my ministerial experience happened during my time here. A group of members left us in the 1970s and 1980s. They said they wanted to be free of all the rules and all the doctrines that they weren't sure they believed in. You know, we have 28 of them. That's not too many, but 28 beliefs that we have. Seventh-day Adventists believe that they ought to believe, you know, so we don't believe in just joining the church because somebody says, why don't you join the church? Well, they left. They rented another church. And it lasted for a few years. I went to visit them. I went to visit a lot of people. If anybody ever remembers me when I'm dead, they will say, he was a visitor. Well, maybe that's memorable. I went to visit a whole batch of them. They never came back. The thing I felt sorry for, one by one, they gave up Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. And eventually they gave up the Sabbath and started meeting on Sunday. They don't meet anywhere now, that's all over. But I felt so sorry for the sad old parents whose kids gave up the truth. They cried. It was hard. Only those who keep the truth are really free. Well, lastly, my wife and I have seen many beautiful cathedrals, lovely old cities, where the immigrants left to come to America. And you know, they've stayed. They didn't go back. And nearly all, it's one way. They come here and they stay. And the United States is not perfect. We haven't gotten to where we have social equality yet, racial equality. Even the protesters, they're not going back. They're all staying here. Even the flag burners, they're not going back where they came from. They have to stay here to collect their Social Security check. Well, out here, we can't change very much in Washington, or maybe even in Denver. But a verse here in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Our only hope for healing of this land is in God. And I'm thankful that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. It's amazing how much has changed. When I was a kid, I thought we'd never be very big. I thought we would always be small. I thought that Well, maybe we'd ever get to be 1 million, you know. We got to be 1 million back in the 30s. But then something happened overseas. We still only have about 1 million in the United States, and half of them don't go to church. But we are now the second largest Protestant church in the world. I was surprised by the largest Protestant church. It's the Assembly of God. There's number 4. Number 1 is the Catholic Church. Number 2 is the Greek Orthodox Church. Number 3 is the Anglican Church. You remember Henry VIII wanted to get rid of his queen, Catherine, and the Pope said no, so still a Catholic, he broke away and made the Archbishop of Canterbury the Pope. So those 3 are the largest, of course. But I'm thankful that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has grown so well around the world. I'm proud to be a part of it. And I'm proud that we still have some freedom, but it's going to take the Lord to heal this land. May God bless you all as loyal Americans.